Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 3rd of June. Well, it was a significant move Friday all the way down here to the 61% line, which found support, and a strong turn back up of magenta as short interest faded pretty darn fast. We're still in a relatively soft zone here with the NBI blue here below gray, but the turn up of everything in the crossover of red back above white definitely was that bullish switch. We saw it intraday pretty cleanly. No reset of the orange DOC below red, so that's going to suggest that there's going to be some continued softness. So this was definitely an opportunity to take advantage of shorts that had piled in and massive short cover situation that took place with that. Was pretty clean. And, economically, there's still a lot of back and forth. Now you've got some signs of weakness, but you also have still growth. So is that enough for the Fed to be able to do anything? Prices were still coming in hotter than normal. So no, the Fed isn't really going to do anything. They're going to talk a lot about stuff at this particular stage. They'd like to. I know that's the bias. Of course, now with the Trump situation, you then had 10 senators say they're not going to cooperate with any legislation for spending in that. So that is very bullish from a market standpoint, because if you're not spending new money, at least things stabilize and you know exactly where everything is, and it makes it a lot easier to predict things. So that was interesting side development over the whole going after your political opponent's situation. From a treasury standpoint, continued to soften. From a yield standpoint, this is also going to force money back into the market because, again, you're still nowhere near where current inflation versus the yield return. It's just a bad situation overall. Oil continued to soften. It's also bullish. So that helps ease the pressure for inflation. The longer that goes, obviously the same thing was the situation when it was rising. Helps ameliorate, the pain of, continued rising costs. But are we in a deflationary state? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. That was somewhat bullish for the euro because they're talking about that they may not be able to ease as well. So that supports them, ironically. From a gold standpoint, again, that softer inflation prospect still leaving things a bit soft. However, the next run for gold is not that far off. The same for crypto and that. They've just been in the basing mode, at least from a Bitcoin standpoint. ETH had seen more enthusiasm because of the regulatory change. So there's just a back and forth. And I think this is a lot of that growing uncertainty. But of course, as we've talked about before, in an election year, the bias is definitely to the upside simply because they're going to do everything they can to make things seem as rosy as possible, which we see in some of the numbers even coming out of the Fed. It just defies credulity at a certain stage. But it was pretty interesting here coming in. We had the steep move, NBI white leading, but then, as we've talked about, the magenta takes over, the blue crossed above the gray. Super positive from that standpoint, and then also at the 23%, and from there it was just boom, lightning, and you had nowhere to go but to buy, and it gets difficult from a short cover standpoint because they're just like begging for any price they can get, and that just keeps accelerating things, and then the buy programs tack onto it, and it just snowballs. So we can definitely get cleaned out pretty quick, and here you can see from the intraday 5-minute chart here, it was just all cascading lower, and then it started to turn around once the magenta peaked up there, and we ended up with the fade of NBI white. And once it got below that 10 threshold, you can see here where, and that's where the paint really changes in that one, because that's a clear indication that the bulls have this under control, and sure enough, they took it to the maximum. So it was all clean, all good stuff. Indicators will have been sent out to everyone, and you'll be all set to start the month of June, which I think is going to be a lot more interesting chaos. We may not get a whole lot of directional move from a market standpoint, but we're certainly going to get volatility. So that's exciting. As always, though, anything relevant happens, I'll put it on the Skype chat. Have a good one. Trade well.